We ready?
Okay, so I'm actually trying to get in on the laptop if you'll allow me in.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Hill, go ahead and kick us off, would you please?
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We want to welcome you to our Florida League of Mayors Candid Conversations with Mayors. This is our mental health concerns conversation. And today we're going to kick it off with Scott Payne and Shawanda Barnett as we begin to have great conversations about COVID-19, the mental health aspects of it, and how communities begin to cope. And so, Scott and Shawanda, I'll turn it over to you at this time so that we can move forward into our candid conversation.
Thank you, Mayor Hill. Thank you for introducing this program for us this past year. It's been a great opportunity for us. Let me introduce our guests. So, of course, you just heard from Mayor Taylor Hill, who's City of Palatkas's mayor and also president of the Florida League of Mayors. Also on our panel today, we have Mayor Anthony DiFilippo. He's one we're having a little technical problem with, but I expect to have him joining us solidly shortly. Mayor of City of North Miami Beach. We have Mayor Grover Robinson from the City of Pensacola. And we have Ms. Desiree Jones, who's a licensed mental health counselor and the CEO of Step by Step Behavioral Health Services. To all of you, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Scott. And again, I want to thank you all for joining us. Mayor Hill, as always, it's an honor to be here with you and this great panel today that Scott just introduced. The Candid Conversation series has really been a wonderful opportunity for the membership of FLM to stay connected and hear from each other about these issues. But before we get started, I want to go over just a few housekeeping items for everyone. Please remain muted unless you're speaking. If you have a question or a comment during the conversation, please type it into the chat box. We want you to engage with us and we want to hear from you. So please feel free to share comments or questions using that feature below. And as always, we encourage you to keep these candid conversations going in your municipalities with staff, residents, and even family and friends. And with that, we're going to get started. So Mayor Hill, I know this conversation about mental health in our communities during the pandemic is one you've been thinking about for months. It's one of the many underlying health crises exacerbated by this pandemic. Tell us why you felt that it was an important conversation for mayors to have.
I think the primary reason is because I think everyone's going through it at this time. We're starting to see spikes in crime. We're seeing our children find themselves in situations where they're exhibiting PTSD type symptoms. And I think the community as a whole, we're all in a kind of a situation of unrest. And so I think it was critical for mayors to actually start to have this conversation because we find ourselves being the folks who are listening to the CDC as well as to our EOCs or any of our other organizations throughout the county or even the state and the national level. But at the end of the day, the citizens want to hear from us because we're closest to the people. And in many cases, we're just conduits for information that's flowing from the top down.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Mayor DiFilippo, can you hear us? I want you to go ahead and unmute and I want to bring you into this conversation.
Yes, ma'am, I am here.
Awesome. One of the recurrent areas of concern, not only from the standpoint of protection against the virus, but from the standpoint of mental health, has been our city's first responders. How has the interaction been between your city's first responders and members of the community that they serve due to COVID?
The communication has been very well. We deal with many facets. Our first responders are different departments, our police department, our fire and rescue, even local hospitals here. We've always tried to establish that communication gap between them and our residents, and our residents feel and are rested assured that they're receiving the communication if they want to walk in and speak with somebody at our local police station or fire department, or feel that they're depressed or have any issues. And even our department within itself has created a motivation team to help one another cope with decisions and situations that they're dealing and coping with. So it hasn't been easy, that I can say. But the fact that we've been able to get together as a team and really coach and help each other out through this, as Mayor Hill was even alluding to, even our children, being able to speak with them or having them go speak to, somebody in the police department or a fireman or their health counselor has really helped out a lot. And, that speaks volumes of communities really coming together and helping each other through these crises and situations that we find ourselves falling into already for a year. This was last February. So it's very important to communicate. It's very important to let your feelings be known and for everybody to be able to really understand everybody's situation and have a little compassion for everybody and understanding. So it has worked out very well.
Awesome, and that's so true. So Mayor Hill, can you talk to us a little bit about your take on this illness and the work of first responders? How has this changed the experience of first responders over the last year?
I think it's totally changed the way in which the industry responds to so many different things. I think the other piece of it is we're now seeing our first responders start to deal with the psychological aspects of some of the citizens as they begin to approach them overall. And then the other piece is just really how it starts to affect our first responders themselves, because they're now finding themselves in a situation where they're seeing death at a greater rate, they're seeing sickness at a greater rate than they have in the past. And in many situations, they're finding themselves having to cope in their own personal lives with being subjected to isolation, or even finding themselves in situations where even more so, they don't know what the outcome of their interactions are going to be on a daily basis as they engage in activities with citizens.
Right, so true. Now, Mayor Robinson, I want to welcome you to the conversation. I understand that one of the changes the city of Pensacola has made in response to these pressures has been focused on mental health assessment and care. Can you tell us more about what's happening in Pensacola besides the bizarre weather right now?
Well, Shauna, thank you for having me on here. And I wanted to really thank the League of Mayors. I mean, they're watching out for our health. I had my mask on earlier for my COVID, but also for mental health. Mental health is a huge issue in Florida, all across the state of Florida before we even got to COVID. And then we got to COVID and it has put additional pressures. I think we saw a number of things happen as flashpoints last year in this process. And I think from our standpoint, we were concerned about mental health. We didn't necessarily see it going to the impact that some of the things happened through the summer, but they were things that we knew we needed to address. And one of those things that we thought was incredibly important was the mental health of our own first responders. I think very much the league and some of the things we're doing, focusing on the mental health of our citizens, and we need to keep pushing those things forward. But at the city of Pensacola, we felt like we needed to focus on the mental health of our first responders. We had always had some things that were available for people to go to. The problem with mental health has always been the stigma of going and getting help. So it's almost to a sense where you've got to make it almost mandatory for everybody, so that at that point, everybody starts taking advantage of it, and it is not seen. Everybody has to do it. So what we said is for all fire and for police, we were going to make sure that during the year they were seen by a mental health specialist, and they have to go do that. Obviously, if other things find out in that, we will be working with them through other treatment. But I mean, whether it's fire, when you're a fire or police, you see a lot of things that most of us don't see on a daily basis. You deal with a lot of conflict. We work very hard to be as good as we can be. It's a little bit easier. Fire does deal with some difficult things, but they're dealing with a difficult situation, but not everybody's mad at them. Police, almost when they engage with people, it's never somebody's calling because two people are fighting or in a disagreement and they have to come respond to it. And so they deal with things that are a lot more than most of our city workers. We're certainly very worried about all of our workers, but those that are in our law enforcement, we're incredibly, and not only that, I think detecting things clearly showed what happened this summer in Minneapolis. If you don't address those things and they build and they build and they build, you have the potential for somebody to do something that was so irrational in what they did. I don't think they realized what was going on, and it set everything else in motion. But that should have been the first thing our police chief came to me and said is that should have been detected years ago. They should have been addressing that. So we're trying to do that with our officers to make sure that they don't have that. And then one of the problems is you can have mental health programs for your officers, But if it's not everybody is participating in it, then it has a stigma in it. And we want to get past that and say, okay, everybody's going to do it. I don't care whether you're fine or whatever else, everybody's going to go do it. And we put that in the budget this year and started November and October 1, we started doing that. This is the first year we've done it. And we felt it was one of the things our outgoing police chief, I really appreciate him thinking about that. And I've told him, yes, let's put it in the budget. Let's make it happen. It's the right thing to do. Even in a difficult financial year like COVID, it was the right thing for us to do for our officers and for our citizens. I think to provide good care for our citizens, we need to make sure that our officers are as mentally, their mental health is on top of it as much as anything, because they go through a lot, and we don't need them taking those pressures into their work environment, because there's enough pressure there as there is.
If I could chime in on what Mayor Robinson was saying, it alludes to a very good point. This is so challenging that our officers and our first responders, when they go through all this is something that they're actually taking home with them. And when they go home with them, and they lay down on their bed or they sit down on the sofa and take that moment's breath of air, when they just got home, and they tend to like really digest what they've been through the whole day. As I speak with some of these first responders, it starts settling in, on what they saw, the tragedy they saw, the displacement of families, when people have lost certain family members, not one. We've had families that have lost 3 and 4 and 5 in a month. So when they have to sit down and speak with these people, I mean, it's not the same as it was a year ago. Well, yes, we did have to deal with mental health issues, but it's really gotten a lot tougher, and they've had to really, not just physically, but mentally be a lot stronger to cope with these situations, and know that they could have somebody that they can come into the department or somebody to reach out to and speak to, because they're really taking a lot home. And a lot of these first responders, I don't know if some of my colleagues share this experience, but some firefighters, their spouses are police officers and vice versa. So some of them are both coming home with this great stress factor, and it's really it's hard for them to even keep a marriage stable and a relationship, because they're both coming home with the stress and what they're dealing with and seeing, and it's really affecting relationships as well. So it goes across the board. I just wanted to chime in on that note, as I've witnessed.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me bring Ms. Jones into the conversation here. And Ms. Jones, you've been hearing our guests who are mayors, our panelists, talking about the unique challenges that first responders are facing in this particular time period. The challenge in those roles always, but this is in some cases heightened, and in some cases different forms of challenge. What are some of the effective strategies you might suggest can be adopted or encouraged within these departments and by senior administration in our cities to help our first responders during this prolonged period of challenge?
I think the first thing to do is really partly what they're doing, but the first thing I would suggest is to make sure that as first responders that they understand that they're not exempt, that it's okay that they seek help, and understand that just because they are first responders, it doesn't make them exempt. They are a part of this. This isn't normal. This is a pandemic, and it's not normal for any of us. So first they need to understand that this is a traumatic event. They can experience secondary trauma from this. There's PTSD, and there will be different traumatic events that they're experiencing from this. The first thing I would suggest, though, is that they understand that if they don't care for themselves and seek mental health help, then they can't care for others on a regular basis. They'll continue to burn out and have different episodes if they don't care for themselves on a regular basis. And that starts with educating themselves about mental health, paying attention to their bodies, the signs and symptoms, whether it's anxiety, depression, insomnia, not sleeping, emotional outbursts, weight changes, whatever it is. They have to be in tune with themselves to find out whether they need to seek help for themselves before they can help anybody else. They also need to have a self-awareness about monitoring what they're doing, their physical state, just their mental well-being, so that they can help somebody else. They also need to, I like what they said about the support system. There needs to be a support system in place so that they have somebody to go to when they need somebody to talk to. There needs to be a system in place, because that so many times when people talk about mental health, there is a stigma related. And so when they're reaching out for help for mental illness, it can be seen for them as something that they don't want to do because there's a stigma related to it. So we need to put things in place and talk about mental health more so that we can debunk the stigmas related to it. So the more and more we talk about mental health and we put different things in place, our first responders will feel more comfortable with doing that. And that starts at the top. So if we can get our leaders to talk more about it and implement more programs and put more things in place, then they'll feel more comfortable using those programs. And of course, that will have a trickle down effect as far as them using it and helping their situations a little bit more. I will also try to get them to seek help immediately, before it gets to a point where they're burnt out. Why not put something on the front end? Like, why can't we do this, immediately? Why can't we put this mental health stuff in the beginning versus the end? If we know this stuff is going on, let's put mental health trainings or mental health, let's make sure we educate them on the signs and symptoms of different diagnoses. How do we treat it? What do we do? What does it look like? Because sometimes they don't know. They don't know about trauma. They don't know how to address their trauma. Let's bring different professionals in to do that so that they understand what it looks like. And that way we're educating them. And so once they understand what it looks like with the signs and symptoms, then we can kind of move forward on how to treat it. And then that way we can address the mental health issues.
Thank you.
One of the things I think, Scott, that we've seen, and Dr. Jones makes some great remarks on there. But this is one of the reasons why we felt like it was mandatory for everybody to have to go through some level of process, because so many of these individuals have either come from sports background or they've been military. When you see either your firefighters, your EMS, or your police, they tend to kind of come in those, and those are areas where we've been programmed for so long that we just got to toughen it out. If we're tough mentally, it's going to help us win or do whatever and achieve what we want. So we've been hearing this forever, and it's hard to reprogram that once you get into that. So our purpose was to simply say, you know what, we get it, but all of you are going to go talk it. And then when you're with the professional, you may not understand it, but it gives them the chance to, they might not even know what they're talking when they're talking, but at least they're having the conversation. Because if we just told them to voluntarily go, which we've had that program for years here, but rarely was anybody actually taking advantage of it, because for the most part, they come from a programming through youth sports and everything else they had done that said, hey, you've got to toughen it out. You want to win, you got to be tough. And you can do that to an extent, but at some point it's going to wear out. And especially when we find ourselves dealing with something a year ago. I mean, I was worried about mental health a year ago, just thinking of the shutdown, the month and a half. If somebody told me we're going to be this 12 months in, I would have been like, this is going to be crazy. But that was one of the reasons. Even in the beginning, people were yelling at me and all kind of other stuff. Said, we're not closing our parks. People have got to be able to get outside, decompress. We need some way to de-stress people rather than just build more and more stress on a situation. People have to be able to decompress.
Well, Mayor Robinson, how many sessions are you requiring first responders to attend?
Well, and again, I was thinking it was 2 a year, every 6 months, but it may be 1 a year. And I did not verify that with my police chief before I came on here. It was one of the things I texted him, and I meant to get an answer. I've been looking over at my phone trying to see if I'd gotten an answer from him. But it's certainly at minimum it's once a year. I believe our goal was twice a year that they had to go. So every 6 months they had to go at least talk. And then obviously if something's identified, there's a program at which time they will have more opportunity. But no matter what's going on, you have to go and speak to them.
I'm going to bring the other mayors in just a moment, but I want to come back to Mayor Robinson, for one more thing about this, because you were making a point, and as a former council member and having worked with our firefighters and our police officers, I truly identify with that sense of toughing it out, that this is just what we do. And I remember seeing officers and firefighters injured on the scene, and they're just going to keep doing it. So that frame of reference, I think, is helpful for thinking about meeting their mental health needs. But obviously, all of our cities also have other employees who are also providing all kinds of different services in very unusual circumstances during this pandemic. So what are you seeing there about the impact of the pandemic on your other staff?
We're certainly seeing that all the way around. And Scott, you and I talked about also personally. You remember you asking us about what we were doing personally. I think you can see this. It is manifesting itself. I mean, you can joke about it. It was crazy that it happened, but the mayor that wrote the thing in Texas, I think, simply shows some of the stress that no matter what happens, we went through a hurricane. So not only in the middle of COVID, we had a hurricane last year, and there was a lot of stress because everybody was already at the breaking point. And then you have a hurricane, and it makes people even more upset. And we had another real scare while we were starting to collect debris, but we had a lot of debris on our roads, and we had another scare with another hurricane in the Gulf. And that was like, when I saw the people calling in, and it was putting a lot of stress on our sanitation people, our contractors. So we've all been under it. I mean, it is manifest all over. I think those are things we're working through. Our biggest thing to do is try to rotate people as much as we can. We've been with COVID. We've probably been operating anywhere from, depending on how bad the numbers have been here, anywhere from probably 25% of our people in-house to 50, maybe to up to 75% in-house. And we've been sort of rotating those people through here, just not to keep everybody here all the time, and then allow some of those people to operate from home remotely and do some things, just because again, it's a constant grind. I mean, inspection services is always bad because we've got a lot of building going on, and then people are upset because they can't get somebody out there immediately. So it does put a wear and tear on your staff, and we're just trying to rotate them through enough so that everybody gets a chance to take a break, but everybody knows they got to work, and again, just trying to do those kind of things to work our staff through it.
And Scott, if you allow me to add on to what Mayor Robinson was saying, here in the city of North Miami Beach, we've made it a practice ever since we got into this phase of COVID to making sure that we had employees 2 weeks on and 2 weeks working from home. There are some environments here and offices in our city complex where some are a little tight, and so some employees get a little scared, and because we have to follow CDC guidelines and make sure everybody's working 6 feet apart, and so it's been very helpful to rotate staff 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off from home, and they get the work done, and Zoom meetings back and forth, and communications every day. We have 9:30 meetings every morning. Our city manager does with the complete staff, those working from home, those that are in the office. Everybody's communicating, and things are getting done. I think that it was very important what Dr. Jones said. When you see the symptoms, the signs of the symptoms, and how people are acting or how people are feeling, and the PTSD and the depression. I mean, this all, it takes a toll on all of us. This is nobody ever wrote the book on this. We're writing the book on this, and for us to be able to know that we can have healthy, clean, very well protected, distance working environments, I think makes people a little bit more confident of coming to work, knowing that they're not under that stress. Even as a commission, we our commission chambers was a little tight, so we took it to our theater, where we made cubicles and had plexiglass in between, 6 feet apart. When the governor said, you guys, everybody has to go back to meetings as usual, and no more Zoom, even though we still have Zoom platforms. But we made sure that everybody had their distancing and everybody wore their mask and had the plexiglass in between us. But those special steps put everybody at ease and really show that we can work together, we can work through this and make it happen, and hope that, together in talk groups, because it's very good to talk. The most of the time that we spend with one another are amongst our colleagues that we work with. And when we can talk to our fellow colleagues and, hey, this is happening at home, or hey, this is happening at work, I'm not feeling good like this, like that, they get to talk things out and vet their frustration or their depression or their, their feeling. Sometimes they get a better one-on-one with a person they have confidence in than maybe somebody they don't from the outside. And that has had the tendency to work a lot, as Dr. Jones was saying. So, well said, Dr. Jones, on your articulation on that. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mayor. So Mayor Hill, I think you indicated that the city of Palatka has opted to keep City Hall essentially closed to the public. How are you still meeting the needs of residents?
Well, what we've done is we've kind of gone to an appointment only type schedule. And so we try to meet most of the needs of the citizens telephonically, and we've implemented some additional electronic methods that kind of put certain things in place. The beauty of being in a small town is it allows you to be able to make certain concessions to get those things in place. For example, with our utilities, with the water department and also the gas authority, we've gone to drive-through servicing, which makes things easier for us, and it limits the contact that we have as it relates to doing some of the other things, whether it's with the planning department or some of the other places. By being able to create additional electronic forms and other avenues, we've been able to get more stuff done. What we've all found through this whole pandemic is that the way we thought business as normal was always conducted has completely changed. And there are greater efficiencies that we can have now through Zoom, through work at home methods. And so government's never going to be the same. The business sector is never going to be the same in the way that we do certain things. And we find out that we don't necessarily have to have in-face meetings in the same way that we did previously in order for us all to be effective. And it also allows us to minimize travel time.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've mentioned the things that'll never be the same. Recognizing that cities aren't typically heavily involved in public health provision, you've still noticed some major problems when it comes to gaining access to care for members of your community. What have you seen?
I think probably the most frustrating part for us was we started out with a list of about 10,000 people within our county. It's about 75,000 people in the county. And there were about 10,000 vaccines initially allocated for the county. And now we find ourselves with 500 vaccines coming in per day, per week on a normal basis. So we're getting about 500 vaccines in on a weekly basis. And many of our citizens, we've got a wait list now of about 10,000 people who are sitting waiting on vaccines. The access for rural communities is far different than it is for metropolitan areas. And then the other thing that I've really seen, I think, and it really came from my experience with COVID after spending 10 days in the hospital, was just the level of information that goes out to communities and to individuals who don't necessarily have the best insurance. They don't necessarily have the best services in place. And we start to see that information is not readily available to individuals. And it's the difference between life or death when you're not able to get the medicines that you need within a timely manner. For example, if we're getting remdesivir or we're getting any we're getting blood plasma or any of these other antiviral medications, they're not necessarily getting to the rural areas in the same amount of time that they get to other places. And, every day that you delay is a day closer to death in these situations. And so it's really been frustrating to see exactly how the weaknesses of our American medical system has really played out as it relates to socioeconomic status, as it relates to rural versus metropolitan areas and access to medicine and some of the other things that are out there. And really it's become a very polarizing situation.
Mayor DeFilippo, Mayor Hill just talked about the delivery of healthcare services and some real problems that we're seeing systemically, but I know you're also concerned about those who are providing those services. And you chatted with me earlier about what you're seeing among the healthcare providers, the folks working in the hospitals and clinics. Talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing there.
And I think that maybe we've all seen this across the board, but it's a tremendous amount of stress. It's an overload. I've personally witnessed, nurses and doctors working extreme amounts of hours, days on through 24, 48-hour shifts, coming out with sores on their face, their eyes, bloodshot, they're overworked. And, at the end of the day, this really, even their immune system, from not staying healthy and resting and eating properly, they're putting themselves in predicaments where, we've seen frontliners that have, gone down and have caught COVID and it's really taken a toll on some of them. And, we're noticing that a lot more people that are on the front line, that number of people that were looking for those jobs aren't really looking for those jobs anymore. They're looking to do other things because of the stress that they've had to endure during these periods and depression. So it does take a toll eventually on these workers and on these professions overall. And so, I agree with what Mayor Hill said. There's still a lot to be said and seen about how this new normal is going to be. Working from home and people realizing, that they can speak to their doctor over the computer and view each other and see each other instead of actually having to go into an office. You're going to see a new way of conducting business, of conducting, health. I myself, I can speak as a witness. When I speak to my doctor, it's been on the computer, on Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever it be. And we talk one-on-one, and, if it's a sore or a ward or whatever it is, you talk to them and you show that it's a whole different way of doing business. And how is this going to financially impact our economic growth of all of our cities at the end of the day, when all of these offices are going to be for lease or empty, these office buildings, and what's going to happen, when more and more people are now working from the home, especially realtors. They used to fill up all the offices, brokers. Everybody's doing it from home. Everybody's doing it remote. And so, Mayor Hill, you nailed it on the head. There's going to be a lot to be said as how we're going to see the future changing moving forward in so many ways.
And I'll do a little shout out to you here, Mayor, that in part based on the conversation we'd had and picked up those points. You checked my blog this weekend because that inspired part of what I ended up having to write about, thinking about the comments you just made. But Mayor Robinson, another area when we're talking about the larger community that you and I spoke about is homelessness, which Florida, this is a major issue, especially in Florida, where we're a place that people come because they can survive here during certain seasons of the year. And of course, with all the tourists, there's a hope that maybe you'll get some more money out of it. And so it's a place where naturally we're going to have a larger challenge, and we have, but you're seeing some new levels of concern related to the pandemic and homelessness. Talk about what you're doing in Pensacola.
And I'll be happy to. I do want to follow up on Mayor Hill's comments just real quickly about vaccine. And I think it has been a challenge. I mean, we sort of went out and we were going to go in one direction, and we we're going to make sure that our first responders had the vaccine so that they could provide the services. And I think essential personnel should have been included in that too, because I mean, making sure your roads and stuff are there. It's very important. But I get the double-edged sword kind of thing. I mean, I get the point about deaths and why they went after the over 65 and that pivot that the governor made. But I do wish in some ways we had gotten more essential staff to have that opportunity to get vaccinated, because it seems like in the way for us to be able to at least to deliver services. The hospitals, I'm happy that they got most of their people, all the doctors got vaccinated. It has, my conversation with our 3 healthcare providers here our 3 hospitals have basically told us, listen, that's made a world of difference in how we can do some of the things that I think Mayor DiFilippo was talking about, that they really went through some crisis in last year in the spring and the summer. But getting them to get vaccinated was good. And I wish we had done the same thing here, but I understand the political reasons of why we went over 65. I mean, that is where the deaths are, and that's going to help us eventually get on top of the death situation, which is the most acute way of measuring this. So I totally get that. As far as homeless, the problem that we've really had, interesting thing with homeless, one side's been good, one side's been bad. Homelessness and getting COVID has been surprisingly, we thought this was going to be a population that we were going to have tremendous problems with. We have problems in the hospital. Turned out, and we spoke to a gentleman that was working with the CDC and everything, came down and visited us. He said, we were exactly thinking the same thing was going to happen. The opposite happened. He goes, the reason is we figured out homeless don't really travel between different communities. You have to have this transition. So to an extent, homeless didn't contract the virus as much as we expected or as much as the normal population. However, there was one problem that really did happen, is for us, all of our shelters basically shut down. They quit bringing people into an aggregate situation. So we've been dealing with, in the midst of probably one of the coldest weeks that we've had in a long time, we have a number of homeless, when we have no real shelter to send them to. So we've been dealing with some other challenges and some other problems. It has caused us to sort of be a little bit more flexible and sort of change. We haven't totally figured out how we're doing it, but we've got some things better. We've organized better with our service providers here. We are waiting for some additional thing on some study that we've asked for, but we think we're about to set up and move forward. And certainly I get Regulation Z. I think the Regulation Q is the one that they did for tiny homes. We are implementing that and beginning. We have several developers here that are looking at tiny home opportunities in the city to provide those kind of opportunities for housing and shelter, because it's just one of the things we've been dealing with. While we have not had nearly the outbreak and the transmission of COVID in the homeless community, the fact that we've lost all of our shelters has caused our streets and everywhere else, our parks, to be flooded with homeless that we're trying to deal with. It's a little bit different part of a situation, but we are slowly getting on top of it. I typically tell people government moves a little slow, but it eventually gets there. It just takes a little while, and it's taken us a little bit longer to figure out what was going on. But we started seeing that this summer. I mean, we started seeing large number of homeless, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And then we went around and started calling shelters, and they're all like, no, we're closed. We're closed. We're closed. And we're like, that's why we're seeing so many people out on the street, is because everywhere that they would be going is closed. And so it's caused us to transition a little bit in how we see the solution of what we want to do. So it's been good, but it certainly has challenged us. I mean, I think Mayor DiFilippo said it great. It's amazing to see the work that actually is getting done on a daily basis that always has to happen for a city to run. At the same time, we are dealing with these truly new changes and challenges that we've never dealt with before. We're having to solve those things at the same time. At the same time, we're not all in the building. So it's been an incredibly challenging year, but I'm very proud of what we are accomplishing. And I have no doubt, as I look at my fellow mayors and fellow cities across the state of Florida, that we are, at local government, we are doing a lot of stuff. And we're doing a lot of stuff that if you asked us a year ago, we would have never expected to be doing. So I tend to think it's been challenging, but local government has arisen to the challenge. It may take us a little longer, but I think we eventually catch on and figure out what we need to do.
It's a great segue to the question I wanted to ask Mayor Hill. Given the things that you've been seeing in your community, what are some of the initiatives that the city of Palatka has taken to try to help your community navigate this very difficult time?
I think the first thing that we've done is we've had to create new flexibilities. For example, if we're dealing with cold weather shelters, or we're dealing with food distribution areas for the homeless or for the underserved communities. And so we've allowed churches to come in to do certain things in a different manner, even some of our spot zoning as it relates to dealing with food trucks or some other areas, so that we can make sure citizens are in the right place. On the other side of it is, I think there's a sense of benevolence that comes from the city as a whole when it comes to engaging citizens, providing certain services or benefits. And that's been really the big piece for us overall, and just trying to make sure that citizens who find themselves out of work, or citizens who find themselves in certain situations where they can't maintain in the same way, that we really start to pitch in a bit more, particularly in a rural community of about 10,000 people. It becomes more of that community feel as we push it all together.
Very good. Mayor DeFilippo, do you want to take a moment and talk about some of what you all have been doing in North Miami Beach to meet the needs of your community?
It's been very difficult, but we also, as Mayor Hill was saying, we've provided different options for people to pay their water utility and other utility bills. That we have drive-throughs, drop boxes where they don't have to come in and have that physical contact. Those that do, it's social distance. We provide them with sanitizer. We provide them with masks. We had a generous donation of over 350,000 KN95 masks. So, in not only here in City Hall, we're giving them out for free to our residents, but in our weekly food drives, we've been able to do weekly food drives, where we provide over 1,600 meals for families each week. And we hand out to everybody, and we give them a bag of masks, which bring like 10 inside every week. So we constantly make sure that they have, whatever PPE equipment, if it's gloves, masks, whatever they need in order to make it through that week or two. Just trying to go up and really even to those that can't go through the drive-through, we have, which we started, I think we were one of the first cities to start the knock, drop, and roll procedure, where we partnered up with U-Haul, and they donated their vans, and we were able to get out to the elderly community, to the community who just didn't have the money to sit in line because they didn't have the gas, but to go out. We had, almost 1,000 names, hundreds of names of people that we went and we dropped off to their front doorstep, the essentials that we needed to drop off for them, to be able to have what everybody else was having and to be fair. So, whatever we've been able to accommodate through sponsorships, we've been able to get people to come in and help. We've been providing, and I think that goes a long way, because many people don't even have the money to buy masks. They're reusing masks. We all know that that's not sanitary. It's not healthy. And so we want to make sure that people have fresh masks to use on a daily basis, and gloves. And we'll continue doing that, while supplies last and contributions continue to come in.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a good time to shift our conversation and bring Ms. Jones back in, and to our mayors on the panel, Mayor Robinson, Mayor DeFilippo, Mayor Hill. You may have a question you want to ask Ms. Jones, and I'll give you a moment to think about that. For those who are in our audience, this is a great time. If you have a question about mental health concerns that you'd like to ask Ms. Jones, put it in the chat and we'll monitor and select a couple of those. But I'm gonna kick it off with a question, Ms. Jones, because you've been hearing about the experiences that our mayors are describing in our communities, and obviously mental health issues are not just with our first responders or our staff, but it's a community-wide concern, especially in the pandemic. What are some things that you see are having a positive impact on how communities are navigating this time in terms of mental health? Some things that can really help with that. You're muted. Yep, you're still muted. Okay. There you, no. Can't hear you.
Can you repeat the last part for me?
Yes, sorry. Now that's where I'm glad it's working. So what are some things that you're seeing are ways that communities can help themselves get through this time? What sorts of things help with community mental health?
Okay, I think the one of the biggest thing is making sure that the community has the resources. I think sometimes when we address mental health, it's not seen like we do, like it's medical. Like sometimes we address medical things, but mental health is just as important. You can have the resources readily available, the numbers, where to go, who to call, who to contact, just as well as you would any medical resources. I think it's very important too that we highlight the positive. So many times when we're talking about COVID, you hear us talking about the traumatic part about it, but there are also some positive stories that we can share about it. So I also think sometimes that we can talk to the community sometimes about minimizing some of the things that they see, because there goes the trauma again when they're watching it all the time. But if they're going to watch it, let's put some positive stuff out there, because we know that they want to watch for updates. So let's give them more positive things that they can watch. We can also talk to them about, take that time to talk to them about how to manage their emotions. We can also talk when we're talking about the COVID thing, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the whole stigma, because what we're realizing is some people don't want to tell you that they have it because there's a stigma related to it. So when we are addressing it, let's not attach it to the person or as a disease. Let's just talk about, that person having it, but let's talk about it in, as much as it is a negative, but how can we make it a positive so that we don't have people spreading it and they're not afraid to tell you that they have it. So we need, as a community, we need to be able to address it in a more positive light so that people can talk about it and not be afraid to do it.
That's great perspective. To Mayor Robinson, Mayor Hill.
I did want to jump in on something. And I think there's a lot of positive things. And as we get some questions, I'm happy to answer questions. But before we kind of go to that, I did, at least, I know you and I talked a little bit about this and just sort of going, there is kind of a negative worry as we go forward and where cities are. Not only COVID, we went through I don't care where you are on this thing, we went through the ugliest political season ever. And that's impacting our mental health of our cities and go forward. This is not only my second year, I'm in my third year, I guess, as a mayor, but this is my now 15th year in public service. It has never been uglier and divisive. You're just trying to tell somebody the advice to do, and masks somehow became a whole political issue, and everything that you do. And I kind of laughingly said something about it earlier, that I don't know if you saw the mayor in Texas who sent out the thing, and it was just crazy. But I think that reflects some of the challenges that people in public service are seeing through this, that we've probably never seen a time where there's more pressure on here. And I'm sure, this is what we used to say all the time when I was over with the counties, and we'd say, every county has the same 5 people. They email you. I mean, I got the same ones probably. You've got Mayor DiFilippo, Mayor Hill, they've got the same 5 people who are emailing them the crazy stuff on all sides. That's a part that I worry about more from a mental health standpoint of our city. I think we got a lot of things going forward. We're doing good things. We're making progress, but overall, I see our city as a whole still having these mental health issues that manifest themselves in sort of a very ugly political environment. And so I see a challenge. How do we begin to overcome those issues? Because it's never been more difficult. In my 15 years, it's never been more difficult than it is this year.
Ms. Jones, that's a softball question there. Just, how do we resolve the division we have in this country? But what are your suggestions?
Well, first of all, I can talk to you guys like I talk to my clients. When I get a parent that comes in with a 16-year-old or 17-year-old, and they want me to have like this magic wand and they want me to fix them overnight, You know, I'm just very upfront with them, and I say to them, well, I can't fix something that took 16 years to do. And that's just being very real with them. So I say to you guys, this is just the way that it is. So I encourage you guys, just continue to be confident in what you're doing, you know, be very compassionate, continue to communicate, and just be very upfront and do the very best that you can. Be very positive about what's going on as much as you can. Put the information out there as much as you can. Talk about mental health. When they see you talk about mental health, the more people that get on the bandwagon and talk about mental health and start seeking the services, maybe things will change. It's not going to happen overnight. People do not talk about mental health. And that's why it's, you know, unfortunately, it's taking this to talk about mental health, but that's what's happening. If we would have addressed mental health a long time ago, we wouldn't be here. You know, and I go to different schools and we talk about different things. If the schools would have had mental health long time ago and different programs, a lot of things would be different. It's not going to happen overnight. So I encourage you guys just to stay confident, stay compassionate. You know, you guys are doing a very good job with what's going on. This is a curveball for everyone, not only professionally, but personally. You guys have to deal with your own lives and still deal with all of us. That's a lot. That's a lot. And it's not going to happen overnight. So just remain calm, be confident in what you're doing, be compassionate. This is not the time, you know, to have all this charisma. It's the time to be compassionate, confident, and communicate with the people as much as you can. But I encourage you to talk about the mental health, talk about the signs and symptoms, give them the resources. If you don't feel confident enough to talk about the mental health, bring in the experts, let them talk about it. But the more that you show them that you're okay with talking about it, maybe they'll say, oh, okay, we need to do this. We can talk about it. That's all you can do, because here again, that mother and the 16-year-old, I can't change this overnight. And the most important thing about therapy and counseling is that you have to want to make the change. So you can get in front of a whole bunch of people every single day, but until that community or that environment is ready to make the change, there's nothing that you can do. You can give them a whole bunch of resources. You can do this every single day. You can take everything that I'm telling you, but until that person or that community is ready to make the change, there's nothing that you can do. So I encourage you just to keep giving it, and it'll break. Some changes will happen.
I have to agree with what Dr. Jones said. It's very clear, at least in my experience, that when you talk about things and you talk about the outcome of it, and you know, I try as a mayor here in North Miami Beach and locally to not only speak about the issue, but speak about the actual solution. Speak about how we got to the positive part of how we made the issue that was coming up work. And that's what our children need to hear. That's what our coworkers need to hear. Not just, well, you know, I had a fight in so-and-so because there was 3 people in the elevator, and you know, we rationally talked and we said there was 2 spots. You know what? I took the stairway up, you know, just to make it right. You know, I didn't want to, you know, we were all wanting to go up to the same floor. You know, I went up the stairway. I chose to, you know, be the gentleman and let the ladies ride up in the elevator. I mean, just you got to speak about these things, and everybody's got to work it out together and understand that we're all in this together. We're going to get out of it together, and we have to help each other together. So, you know, and again, going to the positive message, there's so much negativity on your daily TV, on the media, that, you know, we need to start putting positive messages out there. And, you know, as a mayor, I've been doing that on podcasts, on our social media, on Facebook, Instagram, you know, speaking to our community, you know, giving them that sense of confidence, trying to motivate people, you know, to really treat one another right. And, you got to take the drama out of these things and really make it realistic, not only for the colleagues that we work next to every day, but even for our 16-year-old child. You know, we may come home frustrated because certain things happen throughout the day, but don't only express the frustration, express how you actually fixed the problem and worked it out with your fellow coworker or friend at work, or the person in the shopping Publix, in the grocery store. You know, one was looking at you because you were too close to them, or you're not, where, you know, your mask is falling off. I mean, just people right now, all tensions are very high. Everybody just needs to calm down. And I think that the more you said, Dr. Jones, that we talk about it and set the examples of what we need to be doing more often than pointing people out, setting the example is going to make things and tensions come down a little bit more. So I totally agree with what you're saying. And it's my best practice, Mayor, to go out there every week. We do drive through and drive around birthday parties for the kids in our community, you know, because their birthdays can't be celebrated. But, you know, we turn on all the police cars and the sirens and everybody we can get out and do a drive-through parade, you know, and try and motivate them and make them feel, you know, wanted and loved. And those, it's just the little things that make the biggest difference. And people don't realize that, but it's really worked, at least here for us.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor, I'll chime in. I think you bring up a good point. We've got to find some non-traditional ways in which to start to make people feel better, to get them outside of what's going on with the pandemic. One of the things that we did locally in Palatka was we did a stay-at-home party, and we brought DJs in online to play music from all different genres, and and we did it for about 8 hours, and it was really surprising to watch so many people dance in front of their computers. But it was just an opportunity for folks to find that music was kind of a common ground for everyone. And it was a way for people to escape from the reality of what was going on without putting themselves in jeopardy. And so we continually try to find different things. We'll bring food trucks in and we'll do appreciations. And so we'll have different restaurateurs or different vendors have their food trucks set up. And we'll do even a team building exercise for some of our employees. And we'll give out bag lunches from these different food truck providers, just to create ways in which we say thank you for the numerous hours that they work and for them being put in those situations. I wanted to ask Dr. Jones a question as it relates to our children. And I know with government, we always operate in silos. And so, you know, we want to put the onus of dealing with children and mental health just on our school districts. And now that we're dealing with distance learning, and the reality of it is our employees and our staff on a regular basis, they're dealing with the unknowns of having children that are sick, having children that are at home learning or trying to learn. And even in some cases, some of our citizens don't necessarily have access to the internet in the same way so that they can learn. But our kids are affected in ways that we never imagined before. And I guess I wanted you to kind of give us some tips on what we can do as municipal government leaders, as mayors, to be able to really implement some things that can help our employees and our staff as it relates to dealing with some of the issues that concern kids, particularly with kids kind of acting out as it relates to being stuck in the house for the last year.
As far as employees are concerned, I would definitely have, here again, communication, I think, with employees is key on all different levels, whether it be different races, age groups, or whatever. Just, you know, when you're communicating, make sure you're covering all bases, you know, with the employees, grade levels or what have you. And here again, make sure they can access whatever, you know, supports that they have. But when it comes to the children and their mental health, here again, what resources are available to them. But when it comes to, if I understand you correctly, are you trying to find out what resources? Repeat the last part of the question for me. I'm not sure I understand that part.
More than anything, what type of methods can we put in place as it relates to kids to kind of help them through this pandemic, and something that we can share with our employees or staff?
Okay, the first part is just to be consistent with them. Consistency is key for the kids. Also tap into what resources are in the area, which I'm sure you guys are probably doing. If your kids are in the classroom or if they're online, have breaks with them. You can have mental health breaks with them, and talk about, ask them questions about how they're feeling, what's going on. Now teaching's going to be different now. Teachers aren't just going in the classroom to teach anymore. So that first 5 or 10 minutes of the class, they may have to have a mental health break. How are you feeling? What's going on? Let's talk about it. Because now just jumping into the classroom lessons is probably not going to work, especially because what we're finding in mental health, we're getting a lot of diagnoses of adjustment disorder, anxiety, and depression, because these kids that are homeschooled, we're on teams or whatever it is, they're behind 4 walls every day, all day. They don't have any social skills or any social activity with other students. So that first few minutes, I would get them outside. I would take mental health breaks. I would encourage them just to talk, communicate. The teachers are going to have to act in different roles, that they're not used to doing. I would also make sure that your teachers are trained. Make sure that they know what to look for. Make sure that they know what numbers to call, make sure that they're in touch with their parents, make sure that the kids know that they're safe.
Truly, if I can add on, Dr. Jones, as parents, I think we all need to take that extra 15, 20 minutes out of our day that we may be spending on social media or talking with our friends on the phone, and really spend them with our children. And speak with them. Just even if we go outside and toss the ball back and forth in the backyard or in the front yard, it's time that they're not spending with their friends, time that they're not spending in physical education, time that they really need to really, and I do this, with some children in the community and even with my son every day, and it's hard as mayors, and officials and even parents in general, but we have to take those 15, 20 minutes out of our day, whatever we can do to really be that, not only just that parent, but that friend that they can talk to, that they can laugh with, joke around. Hey, what happened in school today? My teacher's, computer, this happened, that happened, and, laugh it off and say, well, and how to respect and really, deal with this new working online situation for those, and most of us are, that our children are working from home, and those that are going to school that are seeing their classrooms with just 5 or 6 students and the rest are online. How are they coping with, not seeing all their friends anymore, and giving them that extra time to be online, to speak with them and sit with them, so that they can see that you're really taking an interest in who they're talking to and who they're speaking with, and just laugh with them and speak with them. Now is really the time to really, plant that seed a little bit deeper and water it, because they need it. They may not say it, but they do need it.
Thank you, Mayor. Schwan, I think you have some questions and comments from members of our audience.
Yes, Scott, I've received a lot of great comments, some about the intersection between mental health issues and substance abuse and homelessness. We received one comment about making sure to remind employees if there are employee assistance programs, EAP programs available, and pushing staff to take advantage of those programs. But one question that I really wanted to pose to the mayors that we received is, what unified effort can we employ as the Florida League of Mayors to eliminate the stigma about mental health in our communities?
Maybe give Ms. Jones a chance to reflect on that, and we'll see what the mayors also want to say. Ms. Jones, take a shot at this if you'd like.
Here again, one of the biggest things that you're going to have to do is talk about it. Talk about it. Maybe make your mental health professionals more visible. When you guys are doing more things in the community, make sure that the mental health experts or the professionals are present. Talk about different diagnoses when it's time to do different events or Zoom calls or whatever you're doing in the community, make sure that a mental health professional is present. Make sure that someone's there just in case they have questions. Most of the time when events and stuff are happening, there's always somebody a medical professional there. There's always somebody from, you know, another professional field there. How often do you see a mental health expert there? How often is there a mental health professional there? You know, what's going on now, make sure that there's somebody there in the community so people can start seeing somebody there, so if they have a question, you know, make it more visible for them and keep talking about it. Keep incorporating mental health in everything that you do.
I think, Scott, in some ways, we've got to figure out how to do its health. Mental health is health. And for too long, we've sort of segregated it out in some ways. We definitely need to talk about it. But we need to remind everybody it's part of health. I mean, if you're going to go check out your knees and your joints and your stomach and all your other things, your mind is probably as much or is more important than any of those items. And yet we don't talk about it. And I think the reason it comes back to, again, it comes back to most of us, and those of us that played team sports all know, I mean, we had two-a-days. We got to be mentally tough. We got to tough it out when we get dealt with adversity. And you hear that over and over again. So it just becomes mantra to deal with. And the issue is sometimes you got to realize it's health. It is simply health. And if your brain's not right, you're not going to be right. And so I think that's a lot of what I think we've got to get beyond, is that point where it's not mental health and it's a supplement over here. It's about health. It's the same as going and getting your regular checkup once a year, doing whatever else you do. It's a part of what you should be getting, like 2 dental cleanings a year. I mean, you should be going and getting your mental health done. I think if that's the part that we could get to it. And I think it's not that anybody doesn't want to do it. It's that programming. One way or another, you've gone through it, you've grown up. We've continued to say, you got to tough it out. You got to be mentally strong. And it's all that programming through all those years of hearing that makes it difficult for people to want to step up and access mental health. And what we've got to be able to say is, listen, your mind is every bit as important as your knees, as your foot, as your stomach, as any other part of your body, your heart, wherever. You got to realize your mind is just as important, and you got to take care of it. I mean, if you go to the dentist twice a year, you ought to go do your mental health at least once a year.
One of the things that I share with my clients is that when it's time to have like psych evals or medication, and I don't push the medication, but I try to have a correlation for them when we talk about chemical imbalance and medications. I always say to them, you know, when you go to your doctor and your doctor tells you that you have high blood pressure or diabetes, and he prescribes you medication, what's going to happen if you don't take it every day? And they'll say, well, I may die, or I may have a stroke, or what have you. And I say, well, if you go to a psychiatrist and he gives you an SSRI or a antidepressant or whatever because you're depressed because you have a chemical imbalance, why is that not the same? Are you going to care for your mental health like you do your medical? I mean, do you see the comparison? But they don't understand that it could possibly be a chemical imbalance. And that's the difference. We're not educated on the mental health, but we're educated on the medical, and that's a priority. Nobody's prioritized the mental health, you know, and you don't necessarily have to take the mental health medication, but you do need to understand and be educated on the coping skills and the strategies, even if you don't want to take the medication. And nobody's done that. All we've talked about are the myths and the stigmas related to mental health, but yet you can take the medication on the medical, but you're not talking about the eating healthy, the exercise or anything, but you're taking the medicine. So we just need to talk about it.
Thank you so much. We received a resource from Mayor Brooke. He started the Mental Wellness Networking Alliance in Northwest Broward, and the goal is about breaking the stigma. And so I want to make sure that you have that website. It is getmentalwellness.com. That's getmentalwellness.com.
Do you have other questions, Shauna?
We've received a lot of comments, and one of them that I love is bring back compassion. There's just too much anger right now. And it's so true. Another one is really breaking down the myths around mental health is just acknowledging that everyone can have a bad day or everyone can be struggling and making sure that it's okay to say that.
That's right.
Mhm.
I think, you know, that's the issue with the anger when you're under pressure for a certain amount of time. I had the I thought it was going to be the worst thing I ever had to do was be a chairman of a county commission during an oil spill in an an environmental disaster. Little did I know that it was just preparing me for a year-long pandemic. But you know, I mean, these are the things that I think that is so much of the problem. Exactly that. There's a lot of just everybody's irritated. Everybody's had to do. Listen, I'm tired of telling people to quit wearing to wear a mask, but you know, again, it's the important thing that we're going to do. So we're going to keep stressing the importance of what, again, the CDC tells us, the things that we've got to do to be healthy. But everybody's tired of that, and I get it, and I wish this thing was over as much as possible. So that's why we got to get back to, I think, what Mayor Hill said. How do we get the vaccine out and get going? I mean, I loved it. My daughter was home. She's in college. She was home for break, and she watched Outbreak, and she came to me and she said, "Dad," she said, "what's going on? They were a lot better at Outbreak at getting the vaccine out." I'm like, "It's a movie, sweetie. They can all of a sudden have all the vaccines they want." You know, it takes a little bit longer to do this in real life, but I think that's some of the expectation that our citizens have of us, and it creates a disconnect. I mean, again, we're doing the same thing, trying to be out there, you know, every time, a couple of times a week, talking to the public about stuff and trying to set expectations. But I think that's the hardest point, is to get their expectations set on what's going on, to be positive, and yet at the same time be able to say, we're going to go through this for a little while. I mean, it's kind of that double-edged sword to say, we're getting better and we're going to do better, but we need you to keep pushing a little bit further and going through that. But, you know, I think we're getting there as much as we can. It's just, it has been very challenging, and all of us are having to work through that right now.
Sean, I know there was another topic you wanted to take us to before we wrapped up today.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great segue really to turning the conversation back on the mayors. I don't want to leave this conversation without giving each of you the opportunity to think about yourselves. Being mayor at any time, under any circumstances, can be both rewarding and challenging, but these times are particularly challenging. And under these conditions, it can just be downright overwhelming at times. So Mayor DiFilippo, what are you doing to take care of yourself during these times?
Well, honestly, I am walking every day. I realize that, you know, this easily has taken a toll on my health, and the fact that, you know, I spend a lot of time in front of the computer and the desk, more than I ever did, because, you know, we just don't travel or go out to meetings or move around so much. So, you know, the fact that, you know, every day I'm taking, and I'm actually doing it with my son. He's 13 years old, and, you know, we go for a 20-minute walk around the block, and that's usually the time that I'll use to speak with him and have some laughs and tell him what happened in my day. He'll tell me what happened in his, and at the same time we're working out. So, and that mentally helps me, because it takes me away from my, you know, daily work routine, and I get to talk about his school routine and you know about becoming an adult, and he's a young man. And so, you know, I take the time to walk, and you know, I take the time to talk to my residents while I can, or I'll put a short video out, just inspiring them, you know, every week, letting them know, you know, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And again, to like what Dr. Jones was saying, you know, pointing out the positive things that are going on in our community, and the positive ways that people are getting better, instead of focus on the negativity and the things that are bringing people down. And I think the more that we do that, the more that we focus on the positive stuff, and the more that we become more polite with one another and compassionate, which I used that word before, because truly we need to. And in lines, I mean, none of us are used to, you know, you know, I think now is the time when we really appreciate doctors the most. When we walked into these doctors' offices and they always had, you know, masks on, and we were, you know, now we're having to wear masks every day, every time in front of everybody. You know, now we're realizing, you know, what it feels like to be in that position, you know, you know, and we need to understand, and now people are understanding more and more how to deal with having to wear PPE equipment and deal with others. And again, just that 5 more minutes of patience, you know, waiting in line, whatever the case may be, social distancing, not standing so close to others, you know, the fact that we just got to follow these guidelines, and eventually there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. We're seeing it. We just got to remain positive. And I think positivity brings a lot to the equation, instead of being negative and narrow-minded. So that's really worked for me.
That's rich. Mayor Robinson, let me turn the same question to you. How are you taking care of yourself?
Trying to get unmute. Thank you very much. No, you know, it's one of those things. I don't know if being a mayor is a difficult challenge to dealing with your mental health, because most everybody is wanting to make sure you get things done for them. So you're generally fixed on every one of your citizens, every one of your staff. And then it's like, if there's any like few seconds left in the day, you're thinking, okay, what do I do? Mine, I walked into by accident, no pun intended, much like Mayor DiFilippo. Last year in April, my son actually came down with COVID, and because we had been in contact, we got quarantined. So in 2 weeks, I started walking and just doing some walking, and I kind of got going on this thing that I was doing about 6 miles a day. And so I said, well, if I keep doing this level, if I go all the way to March 31st, I'll be over 2,000 miles. So that's kind of been my goal. And I found taking the time to set aside time for walking has been good. It also helps me organize thoughts for what we're doing on anything else. It is kind of a good time to do that. So I've dedicated more time to doing that on a daily basis routine, which is help physical health, but also really some mental health, and being a chance to get outside, think about what I'm doing, and probably not having one of these all the time. I guess more than anything else is thank God for the attorney that I had. His first advice was, do not respond immediately on these things without thinking about it first, and give yourself at least some time to figure out if you still feel that way in a couple hours the next day. And because right now, if I sent some things that I wanted to send to some of the people that posted, I would probably be that mayor in Texas. But thankfully, he gave me enough good advice to not respond to some of those citizens.
Well said.
You know, that is as much as anything. So, you know, I don't know that I've done anything well on keeping mental health, but just trying to do some of those things, exercise, stay in good contact. Let me say this, one thing I again want to compliment his leadership is Mayor Hill in putting these things on, the opportunity for us to talk amongst ourselves. I say it all the time. I certainly loved my time when I was with FAC and on that. And then when I came over to the league, I've really enjoyed getting involved here at the league. I tell my friends this all the time. I have great friends. I love my friends. They don't understand anything that I do in public service. So I have to go to organizations like this, like a League of Mayors, like a League of Cities, to be able to communicate with other people who understand, because I can talk to you and you understand so much more about what goes on in my life that even my best friends do not understand about my life at all. And that's why it's great to have organizations like the League of Mayor. And I really want to take that moment to thank Mayor Hill and his presidency and his leadership for doing these things. I think these are good for our mental health, to just have the opportunity to share information together, because there's really no one else you can go to. No one in your city probably knows what it's like to be mayor. You have to go to another city to find somebody who understands what it's like to be a mayor. So I think that's a good, healthy part as well, and continuing to at least have these discussions between ourselves.
Thank you so much for that, Mayor Robinson. I couldn't have said that more. So now, Mayor Hill, I turn to you. We've had many conversations about how passionate you are about the work that you do in your city and with the League of Mayors and all those that you serve. But how about you? What are you doing to take care of you right now?
I guess my experience with COVID, kind of a near death experience, for lack of any other term, it really changed my perspective. You know, in the beginning of COVID, I saw my sister and her family and my brother. I had about 7 family members who were very sick in the beginning, but I had twin nephews, for example. One was really sick and the other was asymptomatic. And for me, having COVID attack my heart, my kidneys, my blood sugar, and I never really had any issues with any of those beforehand. I started out by saying, you know, COVID almost killed me. And then once I got out of the hospital and while I was there, my mindset changed. And I tell people now that COVID saved my life, because what it did for me was it caused me to realize that while I was down for 10 days, the city, when I got back, the city was still there. All those things that I thought wouldn't run while I was gone, they continued to run in the same manner. You get a few messages or whatever while you're in between blood draws or whatever it may be while you're in the hospital. But the reality is the beat still goes on whether you're there or not. And then you also have the time where you began to really dissect your life. And that's what really happened for me. I got a chance to really start to do a self-evaluation. And when I did that self-evaluation, I realized that there were a lot of things on my plate that I didn't necessarily need to have on my plate. I was taking things on my shoulder that could have easily been an opportunity for someone else to take some additional responsibilities, whether it was on the commission or staff or somewhere else. And so once that happened, I also started to understand that I never made time for me. And so from working out to the way I ate or whatever, everything was done in a hurry. And so I got back in the gym, got a trainer, and I go there 3 days a week. And I started to step back and spend more time with me, with my family, so that I had some releases, because the pressure continually builds up and most of the pressure is self-inflicted. And most people don't really get it. And I think once I began to take my life back in so many ways, it's really helped me, because some of those things that were headaches that I really didn't need to be involved with, I now stepped away from them. And so COVID allowed me, those 10 days in the hospital, it gave me an opportunity to really see what it was that I was doing wrong, I think from a personal standpoint, because we feel selfish when we do things personally, particularly as mayors, because everything falls on our shoulders. No one's saying, the commissioner from District 3, it's his fault that these things are happening. It's the mayor. And no one wants to hear from the county commissioner. They want to hear from the mayor, and they think that we've got the answer to all the problems. And even in my personal profession as an attorney, it was the same thing. And so I began to step back and I began to take more time out for me. And I think what that did was it allowed me to kind of to really breathe a sigh of relief. And what I realized was my team was stronger than you would ever think. And people were stepping up and taking on additional roles. And on the other side, I was able, once I felt better, I was more effective, as opposed to having everything on my shoulders. Once I kind of stepped back and I began to love me again in a whole different way, because I was now taking my health into consideration. I was now taking the positive energy into consideration, and even how you deal with certain people and their negativity that may come out as they begin to say crazy stuff about you. It changed. And then the other piece was I began to share this journey. And I think when I started talking to people about the stigmas associated with having COVID, when you talk about those things and you tell somebody, you're like, look, hey, I just got out of the hospital, and everybody starts stepping back. You start to kind of do a breath check, and you realize that at the end of the day, people look at you in the same ways that we made that analogy, in the same ways that they did in the mid-90s when the AIDS epidemic came about. And so you begin to share with people, there's no need to be ashamed, but there's an opportunity to educate. There's an opportunity to really start to push it differently. And I think I became even more empowered from what most people would see as a sickness. And I think all it was just another opportunity to be able to share, and to be able to share from a perspective that's greater than most people would have. And that just really gave me another sense of energy and fulfillment. And so we continually share, because there's so many people that are hurting as a part of this pandemic, and they have lingering effects from COVID. They've got issues as it relates to breathing and some of these other things. And the dissemination of information is either limited or conflicted as to what certain things are. But I think by being able to go back and say, look, hey, let's look at this thing. The only reason COVID affected us in the way that it did is because we had chinks in our body armor, which allowed it to come in and infiltrate our system. But now that we understand this, we can start to become more fit. We can start to become healthier mentally, and put ourselves in a position where we can now succeed. And that's really what's happened with me.
Wow, Mary Hill, thank you so much for sharing your story, and thank you for bringing this topic to the forefront. I know that it was something that many of the mayors could relate to. So Ms. Jones, you've heard our mayors speak of their strategies of self-care, and we are fortunate to still have a sizable audience of mayors still listening in. Do you have one or two suggestions for staying mentally healthy while serving our municipalities in these highly visible leadership roles as mayors?
Just to take care of yourself, pay attention to your body, listen to your body, get physical, like Mayor Hill said, stay physically fit, pay attention to your body, seek help, get rest. Some of all the things that we kind of talked about.
All right, thank you so much. Dr. Payne, you're muted.
Yep.
There we go.
I want to thank all of you for joining us today for this conversation. Thank you for spending time with us, talk about something that obviously is very important to all of us personally, as well as to our communities and all the people who work to make our communities healthy. Particularly want to thank Ms. Desiree Jones, CEO of Step by Step Behavioral Health Services. Thank you for bringing your expertise to the conversation. And to our mayors, Grover Robinson, Terrell Hill, Anthony DiFilippo. Thank you, mayors, for spending time with us today and sharing your experiences as well.
We also learned a lot too. I did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, President Hill. Certainly, I think it was a good topic, so thank you for letting us.
Yes, it was.
Thank you to the
Thank you.
panel, and also thank you to all the mayors for your participation and your support. I look forward to us implementing additional mental health mental health trainings and opportunities within our organization, so that we can kind of move forward. And again, just thank you to everybody for being a part of these candid conversations.
Great leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everyone.